Except for inviting me here tonight, and I've got to continue to jump away there. I promise there won't be any graphic images in my presentation. So what I wanted to do was just kind of give a little bit of background about myself, kind of how I got into the field I'm in, or how I got interested in STEM type activities. I'll talk a little bit about where I work, and I also want to do a kind of an interactive demonstration, possibly illustrating a portion of how the internet works, and I brought some props here for that. So hopefully you can have chicken all over your fingers by the time we do this. And then I also want to tell you a little bit about IEEE, which is a professional society I'm a member of, and I've got more information on that. So I work in the office of the CTO of Ciena Corporation. And Ciena, at a high level, is a telecommunications equipment manufacturer. We make the equipment that provides the bandwidth that, in essence, makes the internet go around. Now, there are other companies that do this as well, but this is a company that helps provide, like I said, bandwidth on the fiber optic cables. And we'll talk I'll give you a little bit more information about Ciena as we go on. I'm an electrical engineer by training. I'm a degree, and what I've done is I've helped build some of the large backbones that comprise the internet. I typically consider myself more of a technologist as well as a network engineer. What I mean by that is all things of technology fascinate me, not just the network engineering and not just the telecommunications profession. So also the professional society, IEEE, also plays into that pretty well. And I've got some resources at the end that they've recommended to me to give to you that gives you more information on things of that nature. So one of the things I want to talk about is how I kind of got interested into computers, into networks, into technology. Considering you guys are all teachers and whatnot, perhaps this is information that might help you if your students have questions about these things, or just information about that kind of stuff in general. So things really started when I was young, and my father would come home with an acoustic coupler modem. Do any of you guys in the audience here know what that means? Know what that is? So that's a modem, but an acoustic coupler modem is you take the actual handset of the telephone. Remember, we used to have telephones that went all the way around and had cords on them, and you plug that into this device that has one little piece for the talking piece and one little piece for the listening piece, and that's how modems used to work, and that's where that sound used to take place. This was before you could actually just plug it into the back. And what would happen is, so I'm trying to think how old I was, maybe 8 years old. My father would bring this thing home, and it was a roll of paper. Just like, do you remember the old dot matrix printers? They have this head that goes back and forth. So you take the telephone, you plug it into the side of this thing, and then there's a roll of paper, and it starts printing. And that's how computer networks worked back in the late 70s, early 80s. And one of the things I remember was playing games. So some of the earliest games, like the adventure games, Star Trek, Hunt the Wumpus. If you've ever been into any of that kind of stuff, this is really cool stuff. So I really got into this at a very early age. Later on, my father bought a computer, even when I was still around 10 or 12 years old. And that enabled me to start playing around with some of the first computer languages, like BASIC. And it also allowed me to dial into BPSs, and you mentioned the sound that the modem makes. This is the days when you had 300 baud and 1200 baud modems, which would be painfully slow compared to the kinds of things we have today. And it made me think about this concept of a digital divide. Certainly you guys are probably aware of that right now in terms of access to technology or access to the latest technology that some of your students have. And it sort of occurred to me that even back when I was young, we're talking, some 30 years ago, that I got a very early exposure and I had access to all this stuff. And it made a huge impact. Some of the things are much more ubiquitous today, and a lot of students have access to laptop computers and iPads and whatnot. But the reality is, there are still plenty that don't, and it's important that we try to bridge that gap. The other thing I wanted to mention was, thinking about this in this presentation, was when did I really kind of get the science bug, or the STEM bug? I don't even remember the term STEM being used when I was young, but I do remember in 8th grade, something happening in my science class, and I just really remember, this is cool, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to go into. And so really, I've sort of been interested in engineering since grade school, and that's carried me through the whole way. One of the other things that was important to me, or that was important in my formation, was doing internships. Doing internships when I was in high school. I got the chance to do an internship at the time it was called National Bureau of Standards. It's now called NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. And great experiences there, great learning experiences. One of the things that it helped me learn was what I did not want to do. Because, lots of times you try out different things, but although this was an interesting internship in an interesting environment, it was a career path that was more research-oriented, and I think I realized that that's not really what I wanted to do. It's not where I wanted to go all the time. And then finally, at least at the high school level, I had pretty much a heavy STEM curriculum, so I recommend that highly in terms of the math, physics, the chemistry, and certainly at the AP level, we were talking about that earlier, AP classes. For those the schools that offer that, definitely something you want to encourage students to take advantage of if they're not doing it already. So, like I said, I've always sort of been interested in engineering, and I got an early interest in telecommunications in general. So I was able to focus on that when I went to undergrad. And my degrees were in electrical engineering and computer science. So these were great curriculums. And the university I went to, the curriculum was designed around more teaching you how to solve problems. And I know, perhaps there's different schools of thought about college level curriculums, whether they should be more vocational or more theoretical. But I found that where I went gave me a great background, a great ability to define and learn how to tackle problems. The other thing is that by virtue of some of the AP exams I took and giving me some extra room in my undergraduate curriculum, my undergraduate classes, I was able to go abroad. And this is really something that I think is important and can be extremely influential on students. The ability to get outside of U.S. borders and see what it's like in other countries, other cultures, and learn how to interact with people of different cultures, different languages, and whatnot. And I found that, well, A, to be a lot of fun, and B, to be extremely influential on how I developed as a person and how I developed as an engineer. I also did more internships when I was in college, when I was an undergrad. And one of the things that taught me there was I didn't want to go into the real world right away. It helped me decide that I wanted to stay in school and get an advanced degree, master's degree, instead of jumping in feet first right after undergraduate. Now, as I mentioned, I did do graduate school, and I got a unique opportunity to do a graduate program in France. And so this kind of played off again, sort of the international aspect that I'm talking about. So not only did I get a chance to go abroad when I was an undergraduate, I went to Australia, which was an English-speaking country. But I did graduate school in France, which is not an English-speaking country. And that experience, by and far, shaped a lot of how I interact with other people, how I try to understand where they are, perhaps what they understand, what they don't understand. And this has helped me tremendously in my career, dealing with colleagues, especially in the company I'm in now, which actually has a fair number of French-speaking individuals. So, once again, if there's perhaps one thing you might want to take away from my background and how that might translate into something you might be able to give to your students is if you have the opportunity to do something international, please go ahead and do it. Okay, so after I finished my master's degree and my schooling, I went to go work for MCI, at the time building portions of the internet. I think I said my background is in networks, and that's where I focused most of my time. And so when I got out of school, the internet was big. This was the late 90s, and so the boom was happening, the bust had not occurred yet. So I helped build large portions of the internet for MCI. I then went on to a company called Level 3 Communications, which is in Colorado, and helped build large portions of the internet for them. And then after that, I came back to the Washington, D.C. area and helped build IP networks for the federal government. So I consider myself an IP MPLS engineer, a network engineer. And now I'm at Ciena, which is actually an optical networking company. I said we make telecommunications equipment, which is primarily optical equipment. So what's kind of interesting is that I am not an optical engineer. I work with people who have PhDs in optics and optical engineering. But because I have a slightly different role, and most of our customers run IP MPLS networks, I'm able to contribute in unique ways to Ciena, even though my specialty is not the same specialty as the company. And it actually allows me to stand out, allows me to contribute. And from that, I think it's important that even if you aren't an expert in a particular field, you might be able to lend something, this is for your students, lend something to a company that's important. So here is just a little background on Ciena itself. I'm not going to read through these slides. I've got this in here basically so that if you want to pull the slides afterwards, you can take a look. But given the profession, there's always been a heavy emphasis on academics and people coming out of the academic industry for some of the evolution in our industry. Our CTO has come out of a government organization that is heavily oriented to research and things of that nature. So it's definitely, when it comes to teaching and learning and academics, Ciena is very big on that. Okay, so now comes the fun part in the talk where we get to do an interactive presentation. This is not really how networks work. I'll give you guys a few moments to read. So what I wanted to do was, using an analogy of the Postal Service, try to actually demonstrate here, hands-on, principles that are fundamental to the internet, and hoping that some of you may find this interesting, some of you may be able to take this back to your classrooms or something like that. So the way to think of this, so this idea is not my own. So this concept of, you can think of the internet as taking a book and trying to send it through the post office. but all you have are letter-sized envelopes. This analogy was actually coined or created by Vince Cerf, who I actually worked under in his group when I was at MCI. And Vince Cerf is known as the father of the internet. He was one of the creators of the protocols that run the internet. So before we get into that, one of the things I just wanted to throw up briefly, I don't want to go into a whole networking 101 class here, but when it comes to networks, you can usually think of networks, when it's taught academically, in layers. And information at the top, an application, think of browsing the web, for instance, that's an application. They filter down on top of each other. And they go down through these layers where the bottom layer is the physical layer. That would be things like fiber optic cables or copper cables. When it comes to the internet, the model is actually slightly different, but similar. And so this concept of applications on top of a transport mechanism, on top of the internet protocol, which is then on top of a network access layer. These are the fundamental concepts of networking that apply directly to the internet that we're going to do some demonstrations with right now. Okay, so the first thing is we need a network topology. So if you take a look around at yourselves here, this should look a little familiar. So I'm going to stand over there, and I'm going to try to send some packets to user. Yeah, okay. Now, all of you people are going to be the routers in the internet. Now I notice we have some empty chairs here, so we're going to consider those some temporary hardware failures. But that's okay, because the protocol will route around. So we're going to try to roughly follow a topology like this. If you're sitting at a table, you can pass the envelopes, and I'm about to get those out. You can pass them to people adjacent to you, and if you're sitting close to somebody at the next table, you can pass it out there. Okay, so begin my package then. So I'm going to step away from the mic, but I'm hoping everybody can hear me just fine. Okay, what I've got here are a series of envelopes, and these represent the packets. So what I'm going to do is, I'm the source over here, and we see the destination over there. I'm going to start handing them to you guys, and I want you to just pass them how you think they should go. Okay? No, it's okay. So this demonstrates how things might actually work in the internet, where you're taking some information and chopping it up into pieces. We've got some queuing delays over here. And this is all completely analogous, even what you're doing right now, to the way things work in the internet. Okay, so he's getting the packets over there, and his job is to reassemble the message. So you can open up the envelope, and inside is the data. Oh, so reach inside the envelope, and there's a message in there. So you got to do them all. So what we're demonstrating here, while he's taking the data out, is something called user datagram protocol. Okay, so as we said, the envelopes are equivalent to IP packets. And inside the envelopes is the data contained. And what we demonstrated is the user datagram protocol. It's a concept where you just send the packets, and the packets find their way through the network And they may arrive in order or they may not. And so you're not supposed to actually use your head to figure out what the message is. And by the way, I didn't practice this, so they arrived out of order, and they could have arrived out of order. And that's one of the sort of the issues with the user datagram protocol. So, in order to remedy that, we're going to do something called TCP, which is the Transmission Control Protocol. And so, what I've got in here is a message. This is a SYN message. So just shoot it over there as fast as you can. Oh, you know what? Krauss, you need to have this one. So when you receive that SYN packet, inside the envelope I just gave you is a SYN ACK. So you send that back to me. Send it back to me. And what we're demonstrating here is something called a three-way handshake. Okay, so this is the second piece. This is the SYN ACK. And I've got one more message here, which is ACK. I'm acknowledging that. We'll send it to him. And what that does is it establishes our TCP session. TCP, as I said, Transmission Control Protocol, combined with IP, is what makes the internet work. You might have heard of the TCP IP protocol suite. That's what we're talking about here. One of the things that the Transmission Control Protocol does is it allows us to sequence the packets, put packet numbers on. So we're going to do this again. Send them blindly. But this time, he's got to be able to look at the sequence number on the back and make sure that they get back into the right order when he gets it. So right now what I'm doing is I'm sending a TCP window size. There you go. Oh, and we got, it looks like a packet loop over there. So there is something inside a packet called a time to live. So if you keep going, once you run out of your time to live, you'll drop the packet. There's all kinds of analogies you can do like this, dropping packets or whatnot, and I've got a couple more. One of the things I did want to demonstrate is domain name system, DNS, is another important piece of the internet. That's what allows you to type in something like www.yahoo.com, and then it gets translated to something called an IP address. The IP address is what actually allows me to uniquely identify him over there, and also in my source to identify myself, so we can do that three-way handshake that I showed. Okay, we're going to do something else with a quality of service. So who wants to volunteer for this one? How about you? Okay. That's a good point. Okay, so, you mind standing up? Okay, so, when you send packets, the routers themselves don't necessarily know what's an important packet or what isn't. So for instance, I might have a voice packet here, so voice over IP, which is pretty small and very important. It's got to get there in real time. But I might have a big packet. So I'm going to feed this packet to you. And as you're processing the packet, I'm going to give you this one. And you're going to look at that and you're going to say, oh, that's a VoIP packet. You're just going to give that to her right away while you're still looking. What kind of packet is that?
Easy.
Okay. So this is the concept. Yeah, what's up? This is the concept of quality of service, where you can differentiate between different types of packets and treat them differently depending on how important or how unimportant. And the final demonstration would be back here. Okay, I want to send you a packet. Okay, stand up. Hold out your hands. Ready? Ready? Here. What happened there was, I gave him a whole bunch of packets, and his hands were full. So he couldn't process my packet. This is called a denial of service attack. So the way that works is you send a whole bunch of packets to a particular router, or in this case, and it eats up the resources, and it prevents that router from doing its job. And like I said, we didn't practice this, so I wish you had thrown it in your face. But, okay. So that's the denial of service tab. Oh, and by the way, what was the message?
A big brown fox jumped over the lazy gray dog.
Right, the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy gray dog. This is the lazy gray dog. That's my dog, Leo. Okay, so earlier I talked about IEEE. It's the world's largest organization for advancing innovation and technology. So I wanted to include some of these resources in here. Even though IEEE is targeted more towards undergraduate and above, they do have some resources for pre-undergraduate. And on this website you can find interesting information on these various topics. Included here in the presentation, so if you get a copy of the presentation later, you have links to all this. And one of the things I love about IEEE is the IEEE Spectrum magazine. You can think of it as, well, I think of it as popular science for real engineers. And when I told IEEE that, when I told them I was coming here to speak, they sent me enough copies of IEEE for all of you guys, and perhaps some of your colleagues. So when we're done here, I've got copies of the IEEE Spectrum magazine for you all to take a look at, share with your students if you'd like. It's a wonderful magazine. So, in conclusion, sort of my advice to you guys as teachers, being in the engineering profession and networking curriculum, is openness is important. Being open to new ideas, innovative ideas, but also people, being open to different people. And like I said, I got that from some of my international experiences. Passion. Help your students find something they're passionate about. Obviously, you guys are all very passionate about what you're doing. So help your students find it, whether they find it in 8th grade or whether they find it later. Help them find that. Communication. This is vitally important when it comes to how you get your ideas across and how you become successful. You guys who stand up in front of classrooms of people are probably fantastic communicators. You have plenty of practice doing it. But not everybody does, and it's an important skill. And continuous learning. One of the things at Ciena, as I mentioned before, I'm not an optical engineer, so every day I get to learn something new there from a profession that's different from mine. I also get to teach them something as well. But the key there is to not be afraid of going into situations where you don't necessarily know something when you're not the expert, because you still have something you can contribute. And so I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation and the internet demos.